Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your guy Rudy SKC, and welcome to a brand new video. We got to talk about Michigan basketball today, guys. They're able to beat the Washington Huskies at Chrysler 91-75 in a game coming off a West Coast trip where they were able to pick up a couple impressive wins against UCLA and USC. Now, this game was fairly close in the first half, but the Wolverines were able to pull away and make the score differential look a lot bigger than what it initially was. And I got to talk about a couple of things, right? So the first thing I want to start about is the game flow. So you look at the first 4 minutes of this game, right? Michigan gets out to the early lead, and they had a good first stretch. And right, Michigan, they were not hitting their three-pointers early. But my big thing was this, right? Michigan, with Trey Donaldson and Danny Wolf, they did an absolutely fantastic job being able to manipulate the defense and get the ball into post situations for Vlad. And that wasn't just opening stuff up for Vlad, it was also cutting lanes up for Nimari Burnett and Roddy Gale. And to me, that's two of the most impressive things about those guys, right? So we know that, obviously Nimari Burnett, he's a great shooter. When he transferred in here, we knew that, he's a great defender. But the added ability that I've seen, in terms of his growth from the last year is his cutting ability, his ability to finish at the basket, his ability to generate positioning there in the paint. And you're able to see that was one of the big reasons that Michigan was able to get out to the lead that it did early on in the game. Both him and Roddy Gale. And there's been a lot of discourse on Roddy Gale throughout this entire year, right? Like, we were saying, what happens when Roddy Gale goes into one-on-one? And in my opinion, Roddy Gale's game, it's best suited when he's driving to the basket off of those cutting lanes, getting those feeds, getting positioning, and getting baskets up. Because he can finish through contact, right? We saw examples of that today. That's one of his best attributes. So in my opinion, that was something that was really nice to see. But one of the big reasons that in the first half, obviously we expected Michigan to win this game, right? From the first whistle to the last, they are able to do that. But, Washington, they're having a tough season so far, right? They just came off a game where they got absolutely blew out by Michigan State. And now they come into Chrysler here, and you expected the Michigan team to, beat them, put the beating on from the first whistle. But I think there are a couple things that helped Washington stay into the game early on. And the main thing to me was the foul calls on the bigs. You saw the foul trouble. It was not only Vlad, not only Danny Wolf, but also Will Tschetter. All three of our bigs have 2 fouls within the first 10 minutes of the game. As an offense, not only as an offense, but as a defense, it's super hard to maneuver your defense when that happens. And you saw them taking advantage, right? They had great Osabar. He was going crazy. That was their big number 1 on Washington. He was going crazy for them in the first half. And that's because when you get into foul trouble, you can't play as aggressive on the defensive side of the ball as you would like. And Michigan, on the defensive side, they're a team that likes to take chances, right? We talk about it with the Pistons all the time. It's a similar way they run their defense. They like to take chances. They like to go for steals. And when you have all your big guys in foul trouble, that becomes super difficult. So that's why, and then Osabar, that's complete credit to him. It wasn't just a Michigan defense thing. He was playing his butt off in the first half. He's getting some good shots. And I really think that one thing he did well on Washington was, I think they came in and they set a physical tone. Right? Michigan, they're coming off a West Coast trip. You expect maybe there's some kind of slippage coming in. And I think in the first couple of minutes, from specifically a physicality perspective, there was a slight difference, right? You saw from the whistle 1, right? Osabar comes in and he basically knocks Vlad backward in the paint. That's something we weren't used to seeing, right? Last game we saw how much of a beast Vlad was in the paint. And on the defensive side, how well he was able to stand his ground. And you saw them set that physicality tone. But I think after that, that first stretch, you really saw Michigan start to lock in and match that level of physicality going forward. But that's something I wanted to mention. So great, credit to Osabar completely in that first half. He was able to take advantage of Michigan's bigs being in foul trouble. Just speaking on the officiating on that topic, I think tonight to me it was dreadful. Whenever you're officiating a game, right? Especially in college basketball, I think it's worse in college than it is in the NBA because they call every petty little thing in college. And to me, sometimes it makes the game a little unenjoyable to watch, right? Because you already got the 4-minute media timeouts every 4 minutes. And on top of that, you add these tic-tac foul calls on the perimeter, and they called so many on Michigan today. And at the same time, there were also a ton they missed. They let so many people play through contact, and it was on both sides of the ball, whether it was Washington or Michigan. So to me, I think it was inconsistent, and it was a little bit too much tic-tacky for my liking. And as a viewership product to me, that made, some stretches of this game a little hard to watch. Right? Because they kept calling fouls on the smallest of things, and you after you get into the bonus, you have a ton of one of ones, right? So from that perspective, in my opinion, that really was something that I wish that didn't happen. And then so let's get this stretch out of the way, right? So in the first half, the most interesting thing to me comes about a little bit more than midway through the first half. So Michigan, they switched to a zone, right? They clearly see that Osabar is killing them. They switched to a zone to try to get Washington to be forced into situations where they just don't have open shooters. They have to get into the lanes. They have to get floaters, take what the defense gives them. And even when they have their open threes, Michigan just said, "Go ahead, take them. We're not worried about you. We don't want you guys getting penetration, getting the ball into the post, and letting Osabar get easy opportunities." Right? They ran some kind of zone. Michigan ran some zone, and it was effective. But then Washington decides to come back, and they're running a 1-3-1 zone on Michigan. And I'm looking at the TV, and I was super confused. Right? I see it that first thing, and I'm like, oh my God, we have wing shooters. If there's one thing Michigan can do, they can shoot the pigskin off the ball. I guess they're off the ball, right? Pigskin would be football. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But they can shoot the ball, right? Point being, you saw as soon as they went to the zone, Nimari Burnett, he has 9 points, 3 threes to end the first half, and that was the difference from Washington being in a 3 to 4 point game to Washington being in a 10 to 12 point game during halftime. So I was really confused on the coaching. I don't know what the messaging. So if you guys don't know, with the 1-3-1 zone, the main weakness of it is the corner shootings, right? The corner shots, corner 3-pointers. Now, when you normally get the ball to the corner, the 1-3-1 encourages you to get the ball to the corner so that they can try to create a trap. But that's not what Washington was trying to do. I didn't see them attempting. They weren't rotating over to get a trap. They weren't rotating the big over to get a trap. They're running a base 1-3-1. And in my opinion, I don't know. I think that's something on coaching where as a viewer, I'm like, what are you guys doing? I mean, I'll take it, but if you're a Washington fan and you're looking that's something that's got to concern you, right? Because that's not just on the players. That's in my opinion, that's on the coaching too. And obviously maybe there's some things I can't see, right? That obviously that's a college basketball coach with years of experience. He obviously saw something that warranted them to go into that 1-3-1 zone. But when you have guys who can shoot the ball like Michigan does, I don't know. I don't think that's a good strategy. So, that was great for Michigan. I think they were able to use that to kind of get ahead in the game because early on they weren't hitting their threes. They were 2 for 8 to start off. And we know how good of a shooting stretch the team has been on the past month pretty much. So I think that really unlocked Michigan's offense to take it to a next level. If you get Michigan hot in the game, it's goodbye. You're not keeping up with them. That's the big difference that we've seen between this year and obviously the last couple years of Juwan Howard's tenure is that these guys, when they get hot, they're one of the most fun offenses to watch in college basketball. So they're a high-tempo offense. You got to make decisions quick. You got to be able to shoot the ball. And they have freakishly long players at the wings, whether it's Danny Wolf or Nimari Burnett or Roddy Gale, that really helps them, whether it's on the outside shooting the 3 or even on the interior getting good shots in the paint. So that's one thing I want to mention. So that's to end the first half. The second half comes around and it's kind of going a little back and forth, right? Michigan, they go ahead a little bit, but then Washington, they get a few buckets to cut it down. I think you saw in the last 10 minutes or so, Danny Wolf took over the game, in my opinion. And you'll look at the stats and say, what are you talking about? When you have the action of Danny Wolf coming off the pin down screen of Vlad Golden, and you have him catching the ball, and you essentially have 2 7-footers running pick and roll. We've seen that throughout the season, how successful that's been. But Danny Wolf's court vision in that last 10-minute stretch in the second half was alien-like. I mean, there's a reason they call these guys Area 51, right? but that court vision was crazy. It was not just, getting the ball to Vlad on the pick and roll. The way he was seeing the rest of the court. You saw a couple skip passes to the outside that generated open looks for three, right? That's when you started to see guys like, what's his name? Give me a second. Sam Walters generate open looks for three. So to me, that was the big difference from, Michigan, staying in sort of that 10-12 game to looking like a blowout at the end, was the fact that Danny Wolf was able to come in and do that. And I think that this is something interesting for Michigan going forward, right? I don't necessarily know who's the guy who can settle the offense, right? I think there's two guys, right? Obviously, you have Trey Donaldson and Danny Wolf. So who's the guy who's taking the shot in crunch time? It's really tough to tell. And Trey Donaldson obviously didn't have his best offensive game tonight, but from the standpoint of limiting turnovers, he was unbelievable. And what have we seen from the great Michigan teams in the past, right? Beilein's teams. We've seen two teams make runs all the way to the national championship within the last 15 years. There are always two things. They're always great at shooting the ball. They're great, one of the best teams in the NCAA in limiting turnovers. And you saw both of those things from Michigan today. You saw how good Trey Donaldson was at taking care of the ball. And this has really shown me that if you have a guy like Trey Donaldson, who is essentially, he orchestrates the Michigan offense, the base offense, right? If you get the ball to Danny Wolf, he can be your secondary creator. But the offense, it runs through Trey Donaldson, at least in whether it's in the transition or semi-transition, right? You get to a half-court setting, you let Danny Wolf can make, he can get to the basket in any kind of angle and make shots, which is ridiculous. But, Trey Donaldson in the transition, in my opinion, is dangerous. And for setting up the Michigan offense, he's absolutely needed. You see what happens when he goes to the bench. Michigan's offense generally has cold stretches. So to me, that's going to be interesting to see who can really take that forward because, from the first month and a half of the year, I really thought Trey Donaldson is going to be the guy. But, maybe the last couple weeks or so, I'm like, man, in crunch time, giving the ball to Danny Wolf, letting him go to work, that just might be a better option, with the arsenal that he has in the game, with the court vision that he has, the ability to find open shooters, the ability to create open shots. So I don't know what Michigan's going to do about that, but in my opinion, they're entering right now the first real stretch in college basketball, right? And if you really think about it, right, college basketball, in my opinion, there's three parts to it, right? The first part is the early season, right? So that's what I categorize as, November up to early January. This is when teams are kind of figuring out their identity. You have a bunch of teams that jump out, maybe a couple are undefeated, but it really doesn't mean that much in the grand scheme of things. Then, the latter stages of January roll around, then you have February and then early March, and this is when you have all the tournaments happen. And then obviously you have the March Madness, which is the final stage. In my opinion, that second stage of college basketball is the most crucial one to see if a team is real. And Michigan is entering that stretch right now. They've had great wins so far. And their schedule actually for this next month, the next month or so, is relatively easy. But the big things you got to see in this stretch, and you've seen with the best Michigan teams over the last 15 years, one thing they always did, they always got hot at this time. The ones that made deep runs in tournaments. If you look at, the number one seed team that Juwan had a couple years ago, you saw that teams start to lose a little bit of steam towards the end of the season. And then Livers goes down. And then in the tournament, they're kind of wishy-washy, and then they get bounced out by the Sweet 16. So to me, this stretch is going to be super crucial. And I want to see the Wolverines continue to have this explosive offense, continue to stay hot. But I also want to see what happens when things slow down, because they will. College basketball is a game of runs, guys. We've learned that over the years. College basketball 100% is a game of runs. So I want to see who on Michigan, who is going to be the guy who's the run stopper. Who's going to be the guy when it's a tie game? He's going to go out there, generate offense for this team, and get a bucket, right? Because we know Trey Donaldson, he can blow past anybody. We know Danny Wolf has the ability to shoot, to get to the bucket at any kind of angle, make any kind of shot in the book. So I think that's going to be something really interesting that Michigan has to figure out. But I think they also need to stay consistent, right? This is the start of something. We've seen the turnovers go down the last few games. They only had 11 turnovers today. If they're able to keep up a low turnover count, I think that that's something that for them as a team, it's going to benefit them a lot when it comes to March. Because you see today, the majority of turnovers actually came from Danny Wolf. The key, in my opinion, to Michigan not having high turnovers is how Trey Donaldson manages the game. And if he's able to manage the game in an efficient way, even in a day like today where he doesn't have it going on the offensive side of the ball, if he's able to manage and oversee the game like that, I think Michigan has the ability to make a deep run. But if he's not and those turnovers continue, there's going to be a game, whether it's the Big Ten tourney, whether it's early in March Madness. There's a reason it's called Madness, where things slow down, where your shot is not falling the entire game, where you need to get you need to grind out your buckets. And to me, I want to see if Michigan can play that kind of game and win. We know that they can boat race a team, and then they relax a little. The other team makes a run, and then they have to kind of run away through the last 5 minutes. But I want to see does Michigan have the capabilities of being able to do that on a play-by-play basis throughout both halves? Do they have the ability to go back and forth with another team? So I think that's something really interesting that we can look forward to as we enter, in my opinion, the most important stretch of college hoops, in order to see who actually has a chance of getting far in March Madness towards the national championship, guys. So that's the Michigan basketball recap today. We'll be back soon, I believe, for the next recap against Minnesota. And until then, I'll see you guys later. Peace.